Hi everyone, and welcome to the third episode of our new podcast, Color Coded, where we aim to bring various themes regarding the queer community and its struggles and celebrations. I'm Emery, your host for today, and I'm here with three wonderful guests, Magda, Tomás, and Dimi. Guys, why don't you present yourselves?
Hello everyone, I'm Magda. I'm originally from Coimbra, another city in Portugal, but now I'm living here in Lisbon. And yeah, I'm a second year student, bachelor's, and I'm here to talk to you today.
Hello, I'm Tomás. I came from a very small town near Aveiro, and I'm currently living in Oeiras. I'm a second year of Bachelor's of Management, and here I am today.
Hello. Oh my god, this is far. My name is Dimi. I'm the co-founder and president of this lovely club here at Nova, and I'm a last semester, second year Master's in Management student from Germany.
We're coming from you from Nova School of Business and Economics in Lisbon. And today we're going to be unpacking themes of growing up queer in different countries across the world. I'm representing a few different places. I primarily grew up in Singapore in Southeast Asia, so I'll be reflecting a little bit on my experience there. Dimi will be reflecting on his experience as German and Greek, and we have two lovely Portuguese guests as well. So hopefully it'll be a really fruitful and interesting dynamic conversation about our different experiences growing up queer. So I guess I'll start with the first question, which is what would you say that your country was accepting of the queer community from your experience growing up?
Well, that's I would say that's a hard question because generally I would say yes, but I think there's a lot of hidden homophobia, and especially with older generations it's not that hidden. But yeah, with our group, with our age group, I would say I thought it was better than it actually is. And I do realize there's a lot of hidden homophobia and not a lot of acceptance in some cases.
Okay, from my experience, I think that we suffer more from older people than people from our age, as Magda said, because I think now there's a lot more of education and transmission of values within schools and within TV series that always talk about queer community. So I think people are getting way more easy to accept the differences, I think.
Initially I would say yes. I think just out of a regulatory and law perspective of it, I think Germany is pretty good, even though same-sex marriage were legalized 4 years ago, which for me is really weird. But I think, as already the two said, also in society, I think there's a lot of, not frankly only hidden homophobia. I think a lot of people are taking their freedom of speech opinion upon and be blatantly homophobic, transphobic, or just queerphobic. And I think it's a mixed thing, and it also depends a lot where in Germany you are. So I think that definitely, I'm from the south, so Stuttgart, I've lived in Munich. I wouldn't consider them super queer friendly, but I think Berlin or Cologne, in that sense, it's pretty good, but it really depends where you are, I would say.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think what I hear sort of coming out from the conversation is a dynamic between both systemic ways in which the queerness is represented and exists in countries, and then also the social, cultural ways. And one of the things I wanted to highlight, I think Tomás, you brought it up about representation, and I think you talked about TV series and seeing and queer people, and that's why our generation is more accepting and open-minded. I was wondering if we could all reflect a little bit on what kinds of representations of queerness we saw growing up and how that impacted how we saw ourselves.
Okay, so when I think about representation, I would say there's two main ways I see it. There's media, and then there's people that I see my parents' friends. And I think from that aspect, my parents actually had a lot of queer friends, which is interesting and also made me think, okay, they accept it. But when it comes to media, Like, if you're Portuguese, I think you know the series Morangos com Açúcar, which is like, for you, it's like a youth sort of like telenovela style. And I was thinking, because I grew up with it a lot, and they don't really have a lot of like queer representation that I can remember. Like, I don't know if they even had a queer couple, and like it ended like a lot of years ago. So yeah, that's like the first example. So I would say in media, I didn't see it a lot growing up.
Okay, in my case, like TV series, since I was from a very small town, was like there was no more high contact with queer people, because people are like more afraid to show and to get out of the closet sometimes as well. So maybe let me think a specific TV series like Teen Wolf. I think there's a lot, and sometimes not only in the TV series itself, but like the actors sometimes, following them on Instagram, Twitter, they talk a lot about of that. And then I've always heard Ariana Grande since I was a little boy, because I saw her in Victoria. So like I used to watch, I still do, but since the beginning of her career, and so she was also like a big motivation for that, because she was like always talking without problem. So yeah.
Yeah, I think when I feel a bit shitty now because I'm older, about a decade, but I think, I mean, there was some representation, to be fair, but I think in media, but it wasn't necessarily only German media, but I think like also from the US or wherever else. But it was what bothered me, and it did not help at all. It was they took these very specific stereotypes, and it was like almost usually being queer like very ridiculed. I don't know if that's a word. And making like taking this stereotype and making like this super, oh my god, super flamboyant gay man who was shopping the whole time, having like only girlfriends and all these things. So it was there, but or people also never took it as, oh, see, like you can be that. It's totally okay to be that way. But people use that and be like, see, like this is how gays are. This is how queer people are. And like even worse with like Greek culture itself, because I mean I think I saw it even more like in 20 telenovelas. Like telenovelas in Greece is the thing. And they always had like one gay cousin or like one gay brother, and it was just not the representation that you were identifying with. It's fine if you do, but it was always the same stereotype, and for me it did not help at all. Whereas if I see now, for example, there's I think some hope, because for example I grew up with Disney as well, and I mean, we don't even have to talk about old Disney. We don't even have to talk about Disney now. But there's like some things that if you go to Disney Plus, you see Love Victor, for example. Or if you go on Netflix, you see Love Simon. I think those are relatable situations that I'm really thankful that they're now for the new generation growing up. But for me, it did not do a thing at all, to be completely honest.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Having grown up in Singapore, one of the things that I really experienced was censorship across all sorts of media. Singapore is a really conservative political state, and it still has sort of legal constraints against gay people. And one of the things that I remember is I would watch Glee, like illegally somehow online, and it would be cut so that none of the characters really came across as queer. So like, of course, the natural conversations and song and dance were there, as wonderfully queer as that all was. The like actual relationships were not present. And so when I moved to the US when I was 17 years old and I was presented with queer teachers, I was seeing the real Glee. I was seeing people who were successful and people who were adults actually be queer people. That really changed my perspective on what was possible for me. And I think, Dimi, your point about like queer people being a prop in storylines and just like stereotyped is really damaging. I think it can also be quite damaging to the way we view ourselves, because, you know, if the representation we're seeing is sort of a stereotype or a prop for a joke or violence in the case of a lot of trans people, specifically trans women, I think that can be really damaging to the psyche and to the sort of social dynamic that exists around our community. So in terms of being in public and being queer and being young and wanting to explore your queerness, did you find that was a comfortable experience for you? What sort of reflections do you have on that?
The thing is, with being in public, I thought like Portugal was actually kind of nice until I left and went to other cities and saw that no, we are not as accepting. And I think in my case, what usually happens is not like, I think people tend to be, unfortunately, more accepting of like gay couples, or if it's like two women, but it's not like, because it's not as homophobic, they're not homophobic towards us, it's more like fetishizing. And I think that's the main difference that I get. It's like if I'm with someone and something happens, people would notice it, but still it makes me feel uncomfortable. So no, I'm not like very comfortable being affectionate with another person if it's the same gender in Portugal. I mean, in Lisbon, I would say yes, but especially my hometown, like it's not that small, but you go out and you kind of know everyone. So, and people talk. So no, I would not say that I'm that comfortable as I would be in like Madrid or something else.
So as Magda said, yes, it's in Portugal. It's a little bit. There's a lot of small towns, which maybe it's hard to show affection. But imagine I'm a person that I don't like to show affection in general, not like to friends, and so I'm not a very touchy person. I don't know, but yeah, I think like maybe in Lisbon it's like widely open than in the rest of the country and Porto, because yeah, everyone knows each other. So sometimes I don't know, people feel uncomfortable because I think like thinking about some of my friends that the parents are not, they don't know that their child are queer or something. So I think, at least in my small town, a lot of people were afraid because there were a lot of people that knew the parents. So I think maybe more in that sense. But I think like in Lisbon, people are way more open and it's way easier. But yeah, I would feel uncomfortable at the same time but not because of being queer, because of I don't like to show affection, more in that sense.
I think I kind of like share some of the same experiences, because I mean I grew up in a rather small city in Germany. So discovering all these things, and you clearly hardly saw anyone on the street in that small street where you can be like, oh, okay, taking a reference there. But even in like the next bigger cities, even now, I would think twice if I would hold my partner's hand on the streets, especially in my hometown, because it's just a safety reason, I think, because I know I know my city, I know the area, of course, I know my home country. The same way with Greece. I mean, God, imagine like me walking through that, like my parents' village where they're from, holding hands with a man. But I think it was definitely not easy, because also, like as I said, we're talking about the fact of representation, and I think at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we're also very afraid of being the first one, I think. So you going out and like people see you, they know your name, they know who you're friends with, they know your parents, and I think there's all these points where they come together. You would be the first one, you would be something that during like via media is super ridiculous, like it's, and I think all these things come together that makes you really, really hard explore your queerness, which if I would be somewhere else in Germany, like Berlin or Cologne, I don't know if it would be differently, because even in Berlin, in some parts, I would be really careful, because I've seen like this year, I don't, like all the protests with the poor kid that got killed in Spain, and then those things happen in Berlin where people, like boyfriends, were holding hands to each other and they just like got beaten to, like they were bleeding. Like I saw everything on Instagram. So these are the things that make you question, like, okay, should I now hold his hands? Even though you just want to sit next to each other, you just want to walk next to each other. And this is, it's just really hard. And I think it was super hard. And from my understanding, it still is super hard.
What I can hear from our conversation is like this sort of tension again between the internal experience of having to be vulnerable and almost like having that guilt. I kind of hear a little bit of like representing your family and creating some dynamic there or whatever, which I can totally empathize with. And then also the external pressure of like genuine safety or, you know, feeling like you will be vulnerable in other ways. So it's really interesting because I think that so much of the experience of queer people is that sort of cyclical relationship of internalizing what we are seeing on the outside, living it on the inside, and then sort of trying not to reproduce that coming out.
Can I just add?
Yes.
Sorry, I just realized. No, but also what you said, like this internal external thing, and like because I often obviously talk about these fears as well, and then you hear people were like, well then, I mean then don't hold hands. What's the issue? And I'm like, but I want to hold hands. Like, why are you able to hold hands? And they're like, okay, but I mean, if you don't want to be attacked, just don't kiss in public. Well, but I want to kiss in public. I want to show affection. Like, why should I have to cut down my comfort and my expectations on a relationship or showing affection to a person just because some people think it's necessary to just be frankly a dick or a bitch? Like, I don't get this point. And this, like what you said, even though if you talk about these things, I think there's still some people saying, well then, I mean, then just don't do it. I was like, well, then don't just give your opinion. Like, what? It's the same vibe, I think. And this is like something I just wanted to say because people don't realize we're like, oh, they think, oh, the poor queers, they can hold hands or kiss. But yeah, you say that because for you it's for granted. Like, you can just go up to someone, take their hand, or like kiss someone in the club, and this is okay for you. But for us, it's just like really like screening your environment. Okay, who looks hostile? Even you can't even see that by looks usually. And this is like genuinely what you said, like it's a safety hazard sometimes, especially considering where you are. And I just wanted to point this out, how no, that's a word, but how heavy this weighs on queer people growing up, frankly, because I mean that's what you do when you're a teenager. Like, you hold hands, you go to the Christmas market, you go to a carnival, all these things, you kiss like behind the stage or whatever. And this is like queer people being robbed about like this, and I just need to understand that a lot of people, that how heavy this is when you grow up.
Yeah, I also want to add something. Yeah, and I think, like, as you said, like, I think society is so, like, hetero-focused, so hetero-normalized that, like, when we try to do something, people think that it's, like, too much, like, you have too many rights, but we just want, like, equality, we want to be able to be free in the same situation. And I think a lot of people don't see it as that, and they see it as being like greedy or something. But no, it's just we want to be able to do the same thing with the same safety. And I think it will take a long time for us to be fully able to have like the same experience as a person who is like hetero or not queer. But yeah, I think that's the main point that I wanted to add.
Thank you. I think those are really lovely points. You know, it seems kind of what we're saying here is like systemic issues are often convoluted to be personal issues, Dimi, right? Like, okay, my hand hurts. Okay, then don't use your hand, instead of saying like, well, how can we fix the hand so the hand no longer hurts, right? And it's a way to, I think, destabilize community, because there's always strength in numbers. So the more that you make it an individualized person, the harder it is for a community to come together and gain strength in that, right? And then also when you make it an individual's problem, it's easier to discriminate. It's easier to say that person's lazy, that person is morally ill, opposed to saying, no, actually the system that is built around that person is not giving them the space to breathe, live, and flourish. So I think those points are really, really poignant, especially in the context of having to understand what it is and grow into a world as a queer person. You know, you talked a little bit about this heteronormativity that we see in society. One of the things that I read recently was a book by Jack Halberstam, which is called In a Queer Time and Place. And in this book, he sort of argues that queer people end up having this realization or moment in life where they realize that the expectations that were put on them, the sort of grow up and get married and have a kid and and do this, that's not really that the only possibility, right? And their queerness is what inspires that, because they start to question those structures in place. And for me, when I read that, I sort of did a reflection on my own experience and thought, holy crap, when I had that realization that my queerness was a force of liberation in those senses, it was really frightening, actually. And it was like a very destabilizing moment. And so I think there's this like beautiful desire for us, especially in the context of pride, to be claiming our queerness and to be claiming the space we're taking up. I think there's also time, though, to reflect on the ways that like that is a very scary and laborious process. And I was wondering if anyone wanted to sort of talk on that.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what you just said. And I think what people forget also is, personally, for me, I don't know if you share this, I'm very indecisive. Like, honestly, if I take a long time to make a decision, if I make it, I take a step back. And I think it's not really about making a decision, but people, especially in our community, they put labels a lot. And I think labels can be freeing, but also restrict you. And that's why, for me, it was very hard to have that process, to identify with something. So, yeah, and I think that's why, as you were saying, I cannot, like, for a long time, could not fully assume and be like, oh, I'm here, I'm queer, everything. That's why it's still a complicated subject, and I don't really identify with something specifically. And I think we should also talk about that. Like, you can be in the community without having to always like scream out and always, share it with everyone. So yeah, that's my point.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's like very related with the expectations people put on us, because like you have to grow up, you have to have a child, and sometimes, I don't know, maybe you want to take a different path in your life, and maybe also related with the labels. I don't know, people, and when you assume you're queer, I think people, they change the expectations as well. Like they would say, oh, now your parents, they won't be able to have a grandchild just because, like, so I think the expectation change a lot, and change like the way you are building your path. I think people think it's different just because like you're different, but I think that's kind of not the reality, because even people that are not from the community, they are all different. So why for us the expectation needs to be different, but why is not the expectation for different people also different?
Oh my god, this question, so much to unfold. I think for that particularly, I think it was very conflicted between like growing up with two cultures, because as I said, like my family's Greek, born in Germany. Obviously with like growing up and my upbringing, it was very Greek influence, in a way that, okay, I need to, by my mid-20s, I have to have a house, I have to have a stable job, I have to have a wife, I have all these things set in place, and a very secure job, and all these things where all my, like most of my cousins usually, like they did it, like, so they got like engaged beginning of their 20s and then got married mid of their 20s and all these things. So there was like a lot of pressure on that, and then I was like one of the few ones who was able to go to university and all these things, like getting academic career and stuff. And then once you start to be exploring your queerness, I think you put everything in question, because for me was at least I always thought, okay, if I come out like it's gonna be like this, I'm gonna be like, whoa, like out and about, I'm gonna be this great like rainbow farting like unicorn, but it was not, because in that point, and there's a one quote from a really nice queer activist. His name is Alex something, oh my god, I hope we can tag this somewhere. But he says that we as queer people are growing up super detached from our actual self, because we have to build up this security wall. And once we tear this down and actually acknowledge our queerness, it takes so much effort and so much time to really get to know you, because you are so highly, and then you try to pick and see what was acting, what was really protecting you, and who are you actually, in a sense. So whatever, like everything that you said, okay, all these expectations, are these actually true? Like I remember, like I started questioning literally every decision I've made in life, choosing the right place to live, choosing the right study program, choosing the right people I want to be surrounded with. So all these things come in your mind, and I think on one point I think it shows you how strong you are. I think some people really are breaking down on this because it's mentally and like psychologically, I think, so much pressure that you are just in identity crisis. Like, who the F am I? Like, and it's really a process, and I'm super fortunate and lucky that I went through this process and I'm still figuring out. I don't think that I'm there yet, but it's like every day by day you figure out, okay, I have this opinion about this, I have this perception about this, I want people in my life to be like this, I want this for my life. Especially if you also have a lot of heterosexual friends, with actually fulfilling this image of, okay, having a house, and I have them, they're like married, having kids, and it's beautiful. But then you're like, okay, but I'm not that way. Like, but then is that okay, or is it not? Or do I question it because the heteronormativity is questioning it? There's like all these things come in your mind. I think that, and I think, coming back to the actual topic of the episode, I think it's also very culturally influenced. I think that there might be parts in the world, or like even culturally, where it's like super open-minded. And I think, I don't know, maybe if I grew up completely German, it would be completely different. But since having a kind of conservative South European Greek, not only touch but grab on it, I think it changed it completely, and it still weighs on being the star gay in the family, because I'm literally the only one, as far as I know. We never assume. But yeah, it just weighs on you. I think it just weighs on you. It makes you question on a daily basis.
Actually, I want to add something that you talked about, which is the cultural part, because I think this happens in a lot of cultures, but mainly in Portugal, I get this question a lot, which is, do you have a boyfriend? Do you already have a boyfriend? Where is your boyfriend? Especially for my grandma. And the thing is, like, I know that I will never be able to very probably I will not be able to give her like the life that she imagines for me, which is, I mean, she wants me to like have an education. She's very proud of it and having a job and everything. But like the grandkids and stuff, I think maybe my sister can be the one to go ahead and do that. And I think that's something that's really rooted in the Portuguese like culture, to have this, perfect hetero living life. And yeah, we are still like the exception. We are still like rare. And I think that's not okay. That's not good for the community.
Yeah, also adding, because I think, yeah, and sometimes I think that when we see a lot of people taking that life, even though it's not the life we want to take, I think like we start getting frustrated and think, okay, maybe I'm not being the way I should be, even though it's not like wrong to be in the way we want to be, because what matters if we are happy at the end of the day, and if that is what makes you happy, and the people around as well. Because imagine, I think that even though they expect us to do something, at least talking about my family, I have luck to have a family that stays happy if I'm happy. So I never felt that pressure. But when I heard from other people, that's why I think that I never experienced that well. But I think that expectations and sometimes people wanting to like build our path instead of us building our own path, it's sometimes what makes so difficult. Because of course we don't want to like let people we like down, and sometimes I think that a lot of people think they are like disappointing the parents and the family just because they are like choosing another option and another way of doing things.
Yeah, I really like that, the sort of stepping outside of the comfort zone and having to sort of venture in the wilderness, as we're sort of reflecting, in ways that are often unguided by much besides our own intuition and will and bravery, I guess. I think when we talk about this idea of feeling excluded and feeling paranoid a lot of the times, overthinking, it made me think about the fact that as young people trying to explore ourselves too, and you get young people in relationships who are both holding this dilemma and this like baggage basically of both trying to figure out through the relationship what is going on, but then also bringing to that a lot of the heaviness of queerness. I think that's really untouched, and when you talked about the sort of misrepresentation of queer teenagehood and like the exploration of that. I think that's really a great point. I'd love to maybe bring that out a little bit in terms of our own cultural experience of like, you know, personally, I feel like I thought I had a really like liberal experience in terms of, you know, I was never policed of who I could like and whatnot, but I still never ventured very far for myself for a very long time because I was, you know, internalizing a lot of negativity around what it meant to be gay and what it means to explore your identities. So yeah, I mean, does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
On misrepresentation, I think that a lot of people don't understand how damaging it is, and for me it took some time to realize this because I thought like people would see this exaggeration of a queer person and would be like, oh, but you know, it's media. But no, a lot of maybe also queer people, but a lot of like hetero people, they think that's how we are and how we behave, and those stereotypes, they just get engraved there and they do not leave. And I've heard, you know, few comments and that really show, you know, lack of knowledge, that I think it really comes from the media and like misrepresentation. That's why, and I think for me growing up, it was more of like lack of representation, and now that like with maybe, you know, foreign media, American shows, that's how misrepresentation got in. And I think the only representation that I got that was, you know, a little bit healthier were from real people that like were friends of my parents or like my friends that were queer. That was the only representation that I got that I thought was healthy. But I think maybe even them, they were influenced by, well, growing up by either lack of it or misrepresentation. I think it's just like a spiral and it's not healthy. And I think there are some exceptions. I think there's like becoming like, you know, there's some characters that are, you know, at least better, like not perfect, but better. They're like human and they're queer, which sometimes it's rare. But yeah, that's how my view on misrepresentation.
Okay, yes, when growing, I think that when we are like watching TV series, movies, and we see like the representation of queer people sometimes, I think when we were young and we still like don't know don't know nothing about like our life, we are still growing, I think people get frustrated because, I don't know, like you see some person in TV, they assume to be queer, but you don't like identify like with how the person is. Like you think I'm not like that person, so that makes me not queer. So I think sometimes people, and me, I was like, so where am I? Just because I'm not like that representation, don't have that characteristics. So I think the most difficult part is, yeah, it's understanding that we can be queer without being what they represent. Like we are people, we have our own characteristics, we are all different. So I think maybe yes, I think. But other thing that I see, it's from nowadays, like it's getting way more representation than maybe when I was growing up, because I think like of the power of social media. I think because when I was a teenager, social media had not that power that has today. Like we used to go to social media, but we didn't see it like that much. Then start getting a lot of power, and think also because of digital influencers that sometimes help a lot, because they actually talk about it and show their experience and show that they were like they were not like how the TV represent them. So I think that helps people to show who they really are and to not be afraid. Yep.
That's lovely. I think for me it was like a mixture about most of the things that you talked about, or like that you mentioned as well. Emery, like for me, like having this representation in media, and like also again taking it back to my Greek family, I have one side that is only women and the other side is only men, and then it's like my mom who had like both, so I have brothers and sisters, and for me it's like all my cousins, because we grew up very closely, all my cousins were like really like men, like big, like doing sports and everything, and obviously through to like toxic masculinity, that's for me that was the image of, okay, that's how you are a man, like you have to be built, like super big and all these things. And then, but I grew up they were in Greece, so I didn't have a lot of things to do with them yearly. But then I grew up with my cousins who were all women in Germany. So, and I had this kind of influence. And for me, my femininity was always something I really needed to hold down, or like to be very ashamed of, because then through misrepresentation and media, it was like, okay, I mean, I cannot, like, I'm a man, like I have to be masculine, I have to be super strong, I cannot have, I don't know, I cannot like clothes, I cannot like, I don't know, Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera, what I did. And like all these, where I don't even consider myself super feminine or super flamboyant, but there's like, we all have tendencies, and I think it's always like an up and down. Like sometimes you feel in that sense more drawn to your femininity or drawn to your masculinity, and I think that altogether misrepresentation, the conservative view of a man and like toxic masculinity put together made me also like really question. It's like, okay, I don't know, like, and then even I didn't see a masculine gay unrepresentation, because then I would be like, okay, I could be like my cousin, I would be like big and like a man but still be gay. And that's like how Tomás already said, like I think that is coming through social media right now, because that's what I did. Like when I came out 2 years ago, and like in my process I watched influencers, activists, whatever. I watched coming out videos, I watched all these things where you see like just a dude who plays foot, like the male masculine thing, and he's freaking gay, like. And this is like something that I feel like we need it, and we need even more, rather than just putting like there's this image of hyper flamboyant gays, which is not wrong. Like I just want to emphasize that this is not a wrong thing to be, or a wrong way to be queer. But I think it's just not only that. There's like so many facets, as Tomás said. There's so many different characters and facets of being gay and being queer. As you already said as well, that you don't have to label it. Am I gay? Am I queer? It's just the way it is. And yeah, I think I just got off topic a little bit.
I was actually going to ask if either one of you wanted to also reflect on an experience that you've had where you wanted to participate in something or do something, and because of your gender or your sexuality or anything else, you sort of felt like you couldn't, or you were prevented from doing so.
Actually, I think with this question, I was pretty lucky, because I tried like I first thought about sports, and I think I tried everything. Like I tried ballet. I also did like boxing and karate and everything. And I think maybe the only reason I may not have tried a sport is because there was like not a female team in my like town. But I think it never really happened, and I think I was lucky.
Okay, for me, I think it never happened as well. Like I was never prevent of doing something. The thing that could happen is sometimes people would think I'm more fragile in doing some sports, but I don't think it's like because of my sexual orientation. It's like because of my personality. I don't know, some maybe. So yeah, but one thing that maybe could happen is like I was a dancer, so sometimes I would feel some pressure. I don't know, because there's a lot like a label that all the dancers are gay. So I think that maybe because when I was still growing and I didn't know like what I was, and I was not thinking about it as well because I was a kid. So maybe it wouldn't prevent me, but it would me like whenever I was doing, made me think like was I supposed to do this or no? Maybe in that way. Yeah, I think because sometimes people, dancing is all for girls and for gay people, and if you don't know you're gay, you would feel, so should I be here or not? So yeah, I think that was like the most preventing situation in my life.
I think for mine was like kind of similar. When I grew up, I was like in this in our city in Germany. We had this Greek community center, and we had like Greek folklore dancing, which was super fun, and I still love it. But I remember those situations where there are like some dances, like cultural folklore dances, that are only for men, and like some are only for women. And I remember the ones that are only for men, obviously you have to have like posture and you have to like growl or something, or like do some things where I always felt like it's so played and I felt so uncomfortable, but only in a way that, does this now mean that I'm not a guy, or like that I'm not masculine enough? So I don't think that it was ever excluded specifically, because as I said, like I never like said it out loud 2 years ago, before 2 years ago. But I think just internally, and also like seeing all this this perception of how, like, what is I think there's always that is only like black and white. So like either you're feminine or you're masculine, or like you can like be in between. So I think that's more something that has prevented me, like as Tomás said, like being a dancer. I remember in high school we had one thing where we could, like, it was like a theme week, and we could choose what to do in that theme week. And I don't know whatever the other things were, but I went to dancing, and I was the only guy. And like from that moment on, I was just like the F-slur, like for the rest of the year, just because I went to like dancing. So I remember those are the things that I remember, like personal experiences.
You know, I think that's it's fascinating, because as kids, Tomás, you're kind of saying like we walk around innocent without really thinking about what's going on, but yet somehow we're internalizing these sort of microaggressions constantly. And Dimi, I love your point about, you know, toxic masculinity and trying to negotiate what it means to be a man, or what it means to be gay and straight, Tomás, based on an activity that you do. It just shows, I think, back to your point about the hand hurting, why don't we just, you know, just don't use the hand? It's like, if this is permeating people's lives in such like deep and different ways, obviously then it's a bit of a problem. One of the things that I wanted to also highlight from what you were saying before is that, you know, there's been a lot of progress in the queer community and in acceptance of the queer community. I've noticed that even from just going back to Singapore after living there, that I saw more queer people around, and I heard more queer events happening and things like that, even though it was undercover and still not sort of legalized. And I was wondering if you guys could just reflect a little bit to finish this off, a little bit about the positive change you think you've seen and where you see that going.
I think if there wasn't like a positive change in my city or here in Lisbon, I would not have like come out or even consider it, because at least in my town, I don't think it's very open, but I think the people that I surrounded myself with are very accepting, and I'm very lucky for that. And I think what evolved was mainly I probably hanged out with the right people. That's one of the options. Or just people became more accepting. And I think in my small town, we had like a pride parade, something which was very small, not like Lisbon. And I think it's like baby steps. But I would say there needs to be like more education, more present in schools, because I think it's still very taboo. And yeah, but I think it's evolving, and people are, you know, considering our struggles and seeing us as human, and that we want to have the same freedoms as other people.
Okay, so in the world we're living right now, I think like at least our generation, and I don't know the ones below, because some are kids, so I don't know if we already can conclude that, but they are like way more open. I think because like right now there's a lot of like incentive for people to accept different people, not only queer people, but that to accept the fact that we are not all the same, so we shouldn't do all the same because we are different people, we have different interests. So I think from my generation, I think people, I've never suffered that much from my friends, maybe because I'm with the right people, as well as Magda said, but since what I saw like in my high school, they're like our people from our age were like very acceptable and very, of course there are always exceptions, but one thing that I notice now, maybe when compared with the oldest generation, it's imagine if from people from like the oldest generation, if some person is being homophobic, maybe the people around won't say nothing, they would just like so ignore it. I think in our generation, when it happens now, it's like if we see, but not only when talking about this, it's not only being homophobic, like being discriminatory, like racist, homophobic, like everything. I think people start like judging and say, why are you saying that? So I think people start like talking and deal with that and like confronting the person that as the activity and start being discriminatory maybe with that person, with sometimes it's not like the best as well because we're being discriminatory as well, but people start like judging more and like getting more annoyed with that because I think it's like maybe because of social media. And maybe a good example is like Eurovision. I'm a fan of Eurovision, and I know that they try to like send a message that we are all different and we should accept our differences without being afraid of accepting that the people that is like around me are not the same as me. So I think, yeah, it's like it's evolving in the right sense, because I think, but not only in the queer sense, but in everything, because I think now we can be ourselves more easily without having afraid. But maybe this only in Portugal, because I don't know how it's in other countries. But like talking now in a perspective of a small town, of course, like in Lisbon, we can be wildly more open and we are not like afraid because there's a lot of more people. But I think like in my small town, like my friends, they are like very open and they don't care about, like they care about the people we are sometimes and not what we do. And because I think that's more what really matters. So yeah, I think like there was a big progression and development in that. Maybe because also in schools people start talking more about it without afraid. And yeah, I think like the values that are being transmitted now are more right than the ones that were transmitted some generations ago. And I think that what is actually happen as well is like our parents, they start learning with us, because if they say something and we say them, oh no, don't say that, I think that they will start learning. But of course there are always exceptions. But I don't know, I think that in the sense of my family, I think they all like they learned with our generation, because me and my cousins, we are all like open and not, I think none of us as like the ideal path, because like my friends are musicians, which sometimes in a society is not like as seen as like the ideal path. So I think like sometimes the fact that our generation is start like getting different and not being afraid of being different, I think is also like teaching to the other generations that it's not wrong to be different. So I think in the general sense, everyone is like evolving and learning to be more acceptable and to be more like tolerant, because we can't live in a world which is not tolerant, I think.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's definitely getting better. I think we're getting in a position where queer issues and queer rights and everything involved with it is getting attention, but I don't want to say the right attention, because a lot of people I think are using it to manipulate their agenda and their bigotry. But at least people are talking about it. I think there are a lot of things where we do progress with, but there are also a lot of things that we go backwards with it. So I'm not a firm believer or friend of pointing out that LGBTQ rights are going the right way, because there's also the different side of it who go the extreme other way. And I think that unfortunately comes with it. The more we say, as you said already before, it's not that we want to have more, like it's just our fight to be equal and to have the same rights and to have the same things, to be able to do the same things. So I think there's always gonna be someone saying against it or like a side. I like that rights, as I said, like okay, you like queer people getting married or like same-sex marriages, but at the same time then we don't have laws that are criminalizing hate crime towards LGBTQ people. So this is a huge issue that a lot of people don't realize. Like of course you can go to the police and like try to get something done, but it's actually not considered a hate crime then. And I think that would be such a powerful decision or thing to happen. So yeah, I mean, us walking and being able to say and having a podcast in a business school, one of the best business schools in Europe, and have a podcast about queer topics. Yeah, it's a way forward for sure, but there's so many things that still have to come, where I'm always being very careful with saying, oh, we're such in a great path and everything's so rainbowy. So yeah, again, to wrap this up, yes, we're going in the right direction, but there's so much that needs to be done and so much that has to be unfold. And yeah, that's my last word.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This was the Color Coded podcast brought to you by the LGBTQI Plus Club at Nova School of Business and Economics. You are here with Magda, Tomás, Dimi, and I, Emery. And please find our podcast on Spotify or wherever else you listen to your podcast, and join us for the next episode. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.